I call the Honourable Darren Hughes.
Speaker, I've decided to vote in favour of the second reading of this bill. In part,
but you had to be woken up to do it.
Well, not at all, Mr. Mallard. In fact, I've been so impressed by the way in which the government has deployed its most charismatic ministers to the shepherding through of this legislation through the House this afternoon that I realise that they're taking it very seriously. And when even old war horses like Alan Peachey can find it within himself to muster a bit of praise for a political opponent, you know that maybe this is something that we can come together on and unite this lovely land around the Cape Town Convention and other matters, Civil Aviation Amendment Bill. So it's been quite an afternoon already, and the Honourable Kate Wilkinson has set out her very clear views on this area. In a way, I know she actually touched on some of those issues in her maiden speech, so it must have been quite a thing to come down here today and speak more in favour of it. There's only two issues, sir, that I want to touch on with the second reading of the bill. But just before I do, sir, I wanted to pick up something that was made, a reference that was made in the first reading by the member for Tamaki, Mr Alan Peachey, because he spent a lot of his contribution saying, well, if the bill results in less lawyers being involved, therefore he was in favour of it. This was one of the central premise that he brought to his contribution to the debate. And I thought that was a very unusual thing for the Member of Parliament for Tamaki in Auckland to be campaigning so openly against lawyers, given what a high proportion of the legal profession reside in his constituency. It might be a case...
Point of order. Alan Peachey.
The message was for them.
Mr Peachey, that's interesting. I'm sure there are other family details you'd like to share with us, but this is not the place, and that's not a point of order. I call the Honourable Darren Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, I am absolutely aware of the fact, and I know what those three children say about him. So I was making it, he wanted us to criticise them on the floor of the House, but they have a good old go about him as well. So I'm sure they charge him extra when it comes to matters such as last will and testament, which none of his colleagues would be in, I suspect, the terrible way he's been treated. After the 2005 election, they all would have got something from the Peachey estate. Now I suspect there's none of them that are going to be getting it. He would have asked all three children for different iterations of that particular legal document. So he said that he forgets some things, and I'm not going to criticise him for that, because that can happen. When he criticised the opposition for not supporting government tax reductions, I was immediately reminded that that man, as a new Member of Parliament, voted against a cut in the corporate tax rate in this country. When the Labor government reduced it from 33 cents to 30, he was the person who voted against doing that. And he voted against the cut in taxes for savers. He voted against a cut in taxes for working families in our country. So I can understand the difficulty he's got when he spoke in the first reading of this bill, on this bill, and he raised those points. I wanted the opportunity to rebut that, because, sir, the great benefit of Hansard is that these things can be checked very, very quickly. And despite that, of course, in this bipartisan way, we wouldn't want to focus on that for too long. So I wanted to come to the 2 points that I said I wanted to speak about for the convention. The first is that the premise for this is quite simple, as other speakers have said. This is a high-risk industry. If you can reduce the risk, that should reduce the costs, and particularly the financing costs across the industry as a whole. That those costs are often enhanced even further because there are so many different local laws that operate that don't protect lenders in a way that is consistent, and so that just multiplies the risk factor and results in higher prices. So we are in absolute support of the premise, and we're very grateful to those who have negotiated on behalf of New Zealand in order for us to accede to this convention. The second point I wanted to make at the second reading, sir, was the changes to the Civil Aviation law, because while we are all transfixed by the Cape Town Convention at the moment, even the former Auckland Polytech law lecturer, Dr Mapp, I see, is transfixed on this point. Whether or not an assistant lecturer. I thought he was a full lecturer in his own right. The assistant lecturer. Sorry, there's no shame in that, Mr Mallard. I have to say, I wanted to be accurate for the Hansard in that respect. This may be one of his areas of expertise, because I do recall once visiting Ohakia Air Base, and Dr Mapp arrived by aeroplane, which was quite good. In fact, he flew himself down to Ohakia on that occasion.
Point of order. The Honourable Wayne Mapp.
Point of order, Mr Speaker. I know the member is having a little bit of fun in this instance, but I do think he should at least try and have some reference to the facts. I was actually an associate professor at the University of Auckland
Well, that's, Mr Mayor, is not a point of order, but having made the point to Mr Hughes, I'm sure he'll be, feel very grateful that his knowledge on these matters has now been improved.
Mr. Speaker,
Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure the member will be rushing off now to correct this Wikipedia entry because I suspect we're not all as familiar with his CV as he might have assumed. But I was in the middle of referring to the fact that he flew himself into an airbase I was visiting on one occasion, and I know he's a very distinguished pilot in that respect. And so when he's buying his next Learjet, he could use the Cape Town Convention. Now, he was in opposition in those days. That was before he became a Minister of the Crown and took to rushing to the scenes of accident, flushing his business card and flourishing his business card around, making sure that all the emergency workers knew that he'd just driven by. But quite how he copes when he flies over accidents, I'm not quite too sure. Maybe the co-pilot has to bungee out with Wayne Matt's business card and say, "Did you know the Minister of Defence just flew by?" Because no one else, of course, did. So I don't want to be distracted in any way from the important changes to the Civil Aviation Act 1990 that this bill takes into account. I said we've been focusing on the Convention. There are other matters that the second reading, that the bill is addressing, and we should make reference to that in the second reading. There is a fair amount of, I guess you'd call it, legalese with regard to civil aviation rulemaking that's in our current law, and there are clauses in the bill which we'll get to during the Committee of the Whole, which seeks to make sure seeks to rectify that, to make sure they're expressed in a way that's slightly easier to follow, and to set out which persons are able to determine particularly those ordinary rules, sets out what the Minister must take into account when that's happening, and also what consultation requirements are needed to be followed. I think that's quite a good thing to do as well. The less complex laws like this can be, I think the better it is for obviously the industry players, those who have very detailed technical knowledge, but I think those who only have a passing interest from the average member of the public's point of view, having legislation that is easy to understand, I think does give more confidence in our civil aviation system. So, second reading, first reading down, second reading still going. We're still in support. We're walking in lockstep with the national government on this particular item, and we look forward to asking the Minister some questions in the Committee of the Whole. We will expect those questions to be answered. I just served notice of that to the Honourable Kate Wilkinson now. I know that she's been reading through the bill quite a lot, so she'll have the opportunity to answer our questions, and I'm sure that if at the point when that third reading comes and people look to see what's happening in the House, if she wants those 43 Labour votes, there's a lot riding on her ability to answer these questions during the Committee of the Whole. Thank you, sir.